The Hero Least Likely by Ruth and Nordin, Chapter 3. Bernadette angled her hat so that it better protected her face from the noonday sun. The trees that were popping up more frequently did help. A little bit to protect her eyes, but they weren't enough. Maybe after days of being in a cave, her eyes were more sensitive to the sun. She leaned forward and patted her steed's neck. The poor thing didn't have anything for its eyes. It had to deal with the bright sunlight on its own. She straightened up in the saddle and renewed her grip on the reins. Gail and Lucas rode next to each other, but they didn't say anything. Maybe they noticed the tension between Blaze and Zeke, too. She wished she had been there to hear what Blaze and Zeke had argued about. She was certain that she'd been the reason for their dispute. At one point, Blaze had even glanced in her direction. She had quickly looked away before he realized that she'd been staring at them. When it was safe, she watched them again. Blaze, being half a foot taller than Zeke, and a lot more muscular, seemed to tower over Zeke. But Zeke hadn't let that stop him from standing his ground. If Zeke weren't so incompetent with rescuing people, she would have been impressed. Gail closed the distance to her and whispered, "Did you ever have gentlemen fighting over you in Pennsylvania?" "Do you think they're fighting over me?" Bernadette whispered back. "What else could they have fought about?" Bernadette wished that she could come up with another reason for the tension, but she couldn't. It was obvious that Zeke was attracted to her. Why pretend that she didn't notice it? "I bet it's flattering to have two gentlemen fighting over you," Gail teased. "I'm betrothed to Blaze. I don't know why Zeke doesn't understand that." "I'm sure he does understand it. He's not stupid. He just thinks he's the better choice. After what happened in the cave, I don't know how he can think that. I had to make Zeke go into the cave to help Blaze." Aggravated, she shook her head. "I'm still not happy with him for it. I wish he wasn't joining us on the search for Lee and Wilson." A part of her even wished that they had never come across a map. If Squiggy hadn't gotten a hold of it, she could be on her way to a comfortable ranch by now. Sleeping outdoors and roughing it wasn't for her. "Believe me," Gail began, "Lucas and I don't want to be here either. We were hoping to be back on the train to Pennsylvania by now." Bernadette gave her an apologetic smile. "I'm glad you two agreed to come along. I didn't want to stay by myself in town while waiting for Blaze to apprehend the bandits." "Are you upset that he wanted to go after them before marrying you?" "No, he has a strong sense of right and wrong. He told me about some of his life while we were waiting for you and Lucas to come back to the cave. I think as soon as he learned that Lee and Wilson burned down an orphanage, he couldn't turn down the opportunity to go after them." "Lucas arranged for you to marry a wonderful man. I don't think you can do better than Blaze." "I agree. Blaze is the best man out there. That's why I agreed to wait." "You're right. Blaze is worth waiting for. Putting up with Zeke for a short time is worth a lifetime with Blaze." Noting the way Gail grimaced as she said Zeke's name, Bernadette asked, "What did Zeke do to bother you?" "He treats me like I'm dumb," Gail said. Bernadette had not noticed him doing that. In fact, she didn't recall Zeke saying much of anything to Gail. "When did he do that?" Gail paused for a moment, then sighed. "Well, I guess he doesn't do it so much now. But when Lucas and I were on our way to find you, Zeke would watch over me while I made eggs. And then he told me that California is to the west of us, while Pennsylvania is to the east of us." "He didn't know that you knew where California and Pennsylvania were in relation to Arizona?" Bernadette asked in surprise. "Apparently not, or he wouldn't have taken the time to explain it to me." Blaze didn't know why he would do that. She and Gail had received the same education back home, so she knew that Gail was well educated. "Did Lucas hear him say that?" Gail nodded. At first, Lucas thought Zeke was joking. Bernadette shook her head. On top of being a coward who tried to make himself sound larger than life, Zeke was also rude. She glanced at Zeke. He was talking to Blaze and gesturing to a mountain in the background. Blaze pointed in a different direction. She couldn't tell if they were arguing or just pointing out different parts of the landscape. Either way, she didn't see why they had to put up with Zeke. "Why don't we leave him behind when we get to the next town?" Bernadette suggested. "Blaze can handle Lee and Wilson without him." Gail bit her lower lip. "I would love to leave Zeke behind, but he knows where Quartzsite is." "I'm sure Blaze knows where it is too." "You misunderstand. I don't think we need Zeke to lead us to Quartzsite. I just think he'll follow us there if we try to leave him. Bernadette considered Gail's words and realized that she was right. For whatever reason, Zeke seemed to be bound and determined to go after Lee and Wilson. There was no doubt Blaze was going to be the one who actually managed to apprehend the outlaws. She could only hope that Zeke did not get in Blaze's way. Zeke knelt by the stream as he filled his canteen. Another day was coming to a close. The remaining sunlight lit the small stream that wound its way through the terrain. The soil wasn't the best for pockets of streams like this, and yet this stream survived out here. The stream offered what it had without asking for anything in return to those who used it. He heard laughter and turned his gaze to the camp. Lucas was holding Gail close to him. Lucas even kissed Gail's cheek when Bernadette and Blaze weren't looking in their direction. Bernadette and Blaze were sitting a small distance from each other, but he could tell that they were enjoying each other's company. Zeke felt a sting pierce his heart and turned his attention back to the stream. He didn't know which was harder to watch. Was it the fact that the four got along so well without him? Or was it that Bernadette was in love with Blaze? He had to keep his focus where it belonged. One day he was going to be a sheriff. To do that, he would have to be worthy of the badge. It wasn't enough to speak as if he deserved the badge. He needed to act the part too. A good sheriff protected people. A good sheriff helped out whenever he could. Like the stream in front of him, a good sheriff gave without expecting anything in return. Decision made, he rose to his feet. He placed the canteen by his bedroll, then gathered his leather sack. The group grew quiet as he approached. He pretended not to notice. Just because he'd caught some of the kids laughing about him when he was younger, it didn't mean that these four had been doing that to him. "I thought I'd make supper for tonight," he forced out. "I forgot to mention it sooner, but I did pick up some gingerbread before we left town. You add that to the beans and biscuits, and you have a real treat." He noted the way Bernadette's nose wrinkled, and realized her version of a treat did not include beans and biscuits, even if gingerbread was added to it. He glanced at Gail and saw the same reaction from her. Lucas didn't seem bothered by it, but Blaze shook his head. "I already told everyone that I'm going to make supper this evening," Blaze said. "I have my own biscuits. I'm going to make cheese and bacon sandwiches. For dessert, I've already started making an apple pie." "Where did you purchase an apple pie?" Zeke was sure that there had not been any available in town. And even if there had been, there was no way they could carry it in a sack. "I didn't purchase it," Blaze replied. "I'm making it with the ingredients I bought." "Well, that sounds wonderful, Blaze," Gail said. Bernadette offered a nod and turned her adoring eyes in her intended direction. "It does. My mouth is watering just thinking about it." Blaze smiled with pleasure at the compliments. "I had to learn to cook when my mom got sick while we still lived in Colorado. A local woman came by to help us out and taught me secrets to not only preserve the food properly, but she also taught me how to make do with very little." "I'm starting to think that there's nothing you can't do," Lucas told Blaze in a way that let Zeke know that he too thought Blaze was the most impressive man to walk his way through Arizona. And that one stung the most, since Zeke had thought that Lucas was the one person in the group who thought of him as a friend. "Believe me, there are times when I wish I hadn't needed to learn everything that I did," Blaze said. "It would have been a lot easier if I'd had a life like most other people." He directed his gaze to Zeke. "You're welcome to join us. I have plenty." Zeke knew he should say yes. The person in the group that others admired most was making the offer. It was probably going to get Zeke into a better situation than he was currently in if he agreed to it. He didn't enjoy being the fifth wheel on a wagon. But his appetite was greatly diminished now. There was no point in having Blaze make food that would go uneaten. "Waste not, want not," as his ma liked to say. "Well, you know what? I need to take care of some personal business," Zeke lied. "But thanks for the offer, Blaze. You four go on and eat. I'll get something after things settle down." Yes, he realized his words were crude, but he'd learned long ago that people left you alone if you needed time at the outhouse, even if it was a bush in the great outdoors. Blaze knew what a wounded animal looked like, and that was the exact image Zeke had presented as he walked off to the bushes. All through the night, it bothered Blaze that Zeke had felt like he couldn't have supper with the rest of the group. He had been tempted to go after Zeke. Zeke didn't want the others to know how he had felt rejected. He wanted to put on a brave front. Considering his poor performance at the canyon, Blaze thought it was best to let Zeke preserve what little pride he had left. Zeke wanted so much to be the alpha wolf, but he didn't have what it took to do it. And Blaze couldn't accomplish the feat for him. If Zeke was going to be the sheriff he wanted to be, he was going to have to do it on his own merits. Blaze himself had not been born a fighter. He had been forced to develop the skill through long years of hardship and loss. Blaze had no way of knowing what Zeke's life had been like, but Zeke had definitely been sheltered from the harsher realities of life. In some ways, Blaze envied him that. In fact, he envied Bernadette, Lucas, and Gail their sheltered experiences. They had all been frightened of Bauer and his gang because, to them, that was the worst thing that they had ever faced. How Blaze wished that he could say the same thing. But what could one do about one's past? It wasn't like Blaze could snap his fingers and make all the terrible things go away. For better or worse, the past was a part of him. But there were times when being the only one in the group who'd been forced to confront the harsher realities of life made him feel alone. Despite Zeke's inadequacies, he had more in common with the others than Blaze did. Blaze decided that he would do his part to make things better for Zeke. But not too much better. He didn't like the wistful glances Zeke sent Bernadette's way when he thought that no one was looking. Before anyone else was awake the next morning, Blaze heard Zeke head off to the stream. There wouldn't be many more of these streams left as they got into the desert. Blaze slipped out of his bedroll and retrieved his canteen. Then he followed Zeke and started to fill his canteen with the water. Zeke, who was doing the same with his canteen, glanced Blaze's way. "I wasn't staring at Bernadette last night while you 4-ate. Blaze arched an eyebrow. "Yes, you were." "No, I wasn't." "Zeke, the fact that you started off this conversation by telling me you were not staring at her means that you were staring at her. There's no other reason that you'd think I was going to bring it up." He could tell that he'd made his point by the way Zeke's shoulders slumped. "I'm not here to argue with you," Blaze began. "You and I have bigger problems to deal with. We need to get Lee and Wilson. If we don't, they'll continue killing and stealing all through Arizona. Neither one of us wants that." Zeke offered him a determined nod. "Right. They have to face the hangman's noose for all that they've done." "Good." Blaze was glad to see that Zeke could be sensible. "I'm going to help you learn how to shoot a gun." "I already know how to shoot a gun." "You could have fooled me because you didn't do that back at the canyon when it would have been a good time to do so." Zeke bristled. "I wanted to make sure that Bernadette was safe. It would have been wise to start shooting while she was still in the cave." Blaze gave him a pointed look. "You are either scared when faced with a fight, or you are inept with a gun. Which one is it?" Zeke winced, and Blaze knew that he had hit a nerve. "Which one is it?" Blaze pressed. Zeke pulled the canteen out of the stream and sealed it with a lid. He waited for a long moment, then said, "I know how to shoot a gun." "So you're scared to do so when the moment comes." Zeke blinked as if Blaze had whacked him hard across the head. So that was the problem. Zeke wanted to uphold the law, but he lacked the confidence to do so. After a moment, Zeke said, "I went after Cooper when he started shooting at me, Gail, and Lucas. That was before you made it to the canyon." "All right, so you acted on instinct because Cooper shot first." When Zeke frowned, Blaze added, "That's not a bad thing, Zeke. It's a lot better than if you were unable to act at all. It's just that when you have a moment to think about the confrontation, you hesitate. We need to work on that." "What do you mean?" "What do you mean by asking, what do I mean?" Zeke pulled his canteen out of the water and screwed a lid on it. "Are you planning to drop me off at the next town? Do you think I'm so bad at this job that your only recourse is to get rid of me?" Blaze's eyes grew wide. So this wasn't the first time someone had told Zeke that he was scared to do a job of the deputy. And for all Blaze knew, more than one person had expressed their concerns to him. But instead of taking it as a genuine concern, Zeke had taken it as criticism. Or perhaps that person, or maybe even people, had meant it as a criticism, rather than a concern. "No, Zeke, I'm not going to drop you off in the next town. Lee and Wilson are dangerous. They make Bauer and his gang look like girls going to a tea party. I need help. I don't have time to train Lucas on how to use a gun, and I'm sure that even if I did, Gail wouldn't appreciate me risking the life of the man she just married. That makes you the better choice." Zeke gave a roll of his eyes. "Thanks for the compliment." "Believe it or not, it is a compliment." Blaze set his canteen on the ground beside him and directed his full attention to the deputy. "Fear is nothing more than a lack of confidence. And when I'm done with you, you're going to have enough confidence that you're going to help me apprehend Lee and Wilson." Zeke didn't seem to know whether to accept Blaze's words as encouragement or criticism, so Blaze gave his arm a reassuring pat and added, "You have potential. It's time someone came along and drew that potential out of you. Let's put our canteens away and get started." "You want to do this now?" "There's no time like the present." Blaze rose to his feet. "Don't make me wait. I'm not patient. Once I set my mind to something, I want to go after it right away." Blaze wasn't sure if the firm tone would work on someone timid like Zeke, but to his satisfaction, Zeke nodded and went to drop his canteen off with his belongings.